Should you, as a stay-at-home wife and mother, do all of the chores? I have seen this touted as fact in the Christian community. It feels so cheesy because really, where are these problems other than just online? Like, your friends and your neighbors are not all caught up in this kind of stuff. What's the saying? Get outside and smell some grass. Get off the internet. You'll probably regain much of your sanity. Now that I've got that out of the way, there are some Instagram accounts and YouTube accounts that are perpetuating the idea that as the woman, you are supposed to be doing everything in the house. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids, all of it. They are trying to use scripture to support this idea, specifically Proverbs 31. When we read scripture, we look for context and we don't cherry pick scripture. We don't approach scripture to try to prove an idea, that idea being that either women should do all of the work or men should chip in or whatever. What we ought to do is just to keep Colossians 3:23 in mind. Colossians 3:23 tells us that whatever we do, do it willingly as if we're doing it for the Lord. So if you have an attitude like you're keeping tally of the things that he does versus the things that you do, you are doing it unto yourselves instead of for the Lord. Proverbs 31 woman tells us that we ought not to be idle. We shouldn't just sit there and scroll on our phones all day long, though we're all guilty of that. My point is, nowhere in the Bible does it explicitly say, not even in Proverbs 31, that a woman is the only one that should be doing household chores. But with the entire Bible in mind and having a heart for Christ, you will understand that if your husband is working all day long and you are home all day long, that gives you the opportunity to make a household. But that isn't to say that when he comes home, he kicks off his boots right in the middle of the floor and expects you to clean them up. And he doesn't go upstairs and spit toothpaste all over the faucet and expect you to do all of it. Nor should he expect that if he just walks past the washing machine and sees that it has stopped, that he won't touch it and put it into the dryer. If he sees that it ought to be done, he will do it. And he will, especially if his walk in Christianity is mature. A husband with the attitude that it isn't his job to touch it, perhaps in the most gentle way, could use some prayer. I mean that with most sincerity, and perhaps some good counsel from elder Christians in his church and in his community to help him to see that his heart attitude isn't as developed as it ought to be. Most cheerfully, I do mean that, most cheerfully. Not only that, but if you use Proverbs 31 as the argument that women ought to be the only ones doing the household chores because it says that she looks after the ways of her house and it doesn't mention the man at all, I think it's just preceding that in the same, in Proverbs 31, I don't know if it's after that statement or before, it talks about how she should have a heart for the poor, and it only talks about the woman being kind to the poor. Is that to say then that the men ought to not care about the poor? You can't apply the same dynamic to one part of the chapter in one verse and not to the other. If Proverbs 31 talks about a woman doing household chores and you're saying then that means only the woman ought to do household chores, then a couple verses on the other side in the exact same chapter it says a woman ought to have an attitude, ought to be giving to the poor, then you're saying also that the man shouldn't give to the poor. So you can see in the very context of that entire chapter, you are cherry picking to support your idea of what a Christian marriage between man and woman, as that is the only way marriage ought to be, looks like. And it does not look like the woman being solely responsible for the household chores. Now, we in my household, we do lean toward a more traditional sense that I stay at home and I do all of the cooking and a lot of the cleaning, and he works all day long. But when he comes home, because our children are so young, there is still more that needs to be done. And my husband, without grumbling or complaining, Ephesians, will pick up the house with us. And if that's not enough, how are you to teach your children, especially if the children are boys, how to care for his house when he is single? He may not find his mate until he's in his 20s, later 20s. And so is it the idea that he must then have somebody cooking clean for him? His mother's going to be cooking and cleaning for him when he's out of the house? No, he needs to learn to do these things himself. So with my children, I have 2 boys and 2 girls. I teach them the habit of orderliness, because in the Bible it does tell us that God is a God of order. So you ought to run your house in an orderly fashion, though it is hard when they are so young, right? But this is training. These are the training years. So train your children, both boys and girls who will become men and women, how to care for their things, how to put their things away, and how to cook for themselves. Everyone will have the ability to do these things. That way, when my boys, God willing, marry someday, and they're in a marriage with a woman and they have lots of kids, my sons will be able to help as far as cooking and cleaning goes, especially if God blesses them with children, and there's a season of life where it takes truly both of you in having a team partnership to tackle the house and the kids, because it can be very trying in these times. So how are you to train your young boy to fend for himself when he moves out of your house if you have this idea that men ought to not do any of the household work? So the approach that when you're measuring household chores, it shouldn't be that, oh, I'm doing more than him, or he needs to do more, or he's not doing any of it. And you're measuring this, both of you are, that is an attitude of the heart that needs prayed on and worked on. And if you get into scripture and you work on your relationship with God, it will be resolved. If both of you are independently trying your best to mature in your Christian walk, then a lot of your problems will be resolved. It isn't necessarily even that he needs to change or she needs to change. Both of you need to work on your relationships with Christ so that you can get your marriage back on track. And I will do a lot more videos about marriage if you're interested. I did a marriage video a long time ago when we were first married, and it's on my YouTube channel, my other YouTube channel that I started and abandoned. And I can link that. I haven't watched it. Gosh, it's cringy. But it was back when we were in the Navy 10 years ago, and we were very first married, and I made a marriage video then. But we have both grown so much since that video, so I'm willing to do a video again. And if you have questions, please leave them below, and I can ask the Instagram account I have also I asked some time ago on my old Instagram account, but I never did the marriage video because it was just after a tragedy, and a lot of the questions were sort of infringing upon my personal life there, and how I dealt with the specific tragedy. But I sort of just deleted all of those questions from my phone because I didn't want to look at them anymore. But if you would like to ask some questions about marriage and how the roles are here and who does what, really, I can sum it up. I try to do as much of the household work as I can, and he works all day long. And wherever we see something lacking, we pick it up and do it. And it's not a tit for tat, tallied up thing where we're keeping track of who's doing things. He just sees that something needs done and he will do it. And I will try my best to make it so that he never has to do anything, because I genuinely feel like I have enough time to do that. And now that my youngest is almost 2. Back when we were in baby years, when we had more babies than not, my husband was picking up the house a lot more than he is now, because it was just so difficult caring for very, very small babies. So there's a season, I think, and grace needs to be given, which will be given accordingly when you've got the right attitude and your walk with Christ has fixed your heart attitude, okay? So don't fall for this trend. I hate to say that it's a trend. I'm seeing a big trend to push back from pretty hardcore Christian women making you feel bad that your husband unloads the dishwasher. It should never feel like that. And that's not the right attitude. All right. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.